Mujer.
Mujer. M-U-J-E-R. Mujer. Una mujer es luchadora, valiente, fuerte. Una mujer no le tiene miedo a nada y dice exactamente lo que opina. Una mujer es creativa, talentosa, inspiradora. Una mujer sabe cuánto vale y cuando tiene una meta, no hay nada que la detenga. Una mujer es simplemente imparable.
Welcome to all the unstoppable women and allies joining us today for this special joint event between Telemundo's Unstoppable Women program and our Global Women's Network. And what a better day to come together than on the eve of International Women's Day. We are here today to talk about becoming unstoppable, what it takes to step up, stand out, and achieve the unthinkable. Today, we are going to talk to some amazing Latinas who will share their success stories, but more importantly, discuss how we can help make sure their success stories are not the exception, but the rule. Now let's meet them. I'm honored to welcome Sandra Campos, former CEO of DDF and current CEO of Project Verde, also an advisor and board member, and Carla Vernon, Vice President of Consumables at Amazon and Princeton University trustee. Welcome, ladies. I'm so excited to be able to chat with you both today. Before we dive in, we have a lot to talk about. I want to just take a second to reflect on the opening and what an opening it was. When you see that confident little girl on stage describing how she sees and defines who a woman is, what comes to mind? Sandra, let's start with you.
First, I am so filled with emotion by seeing that. I was just reflecting on the fact that I was probably her age when I won a Spanish spelling bee in El Paso, Texas, and had my father and my mother there watching. And I remember the feeling, but looking at it and seeing, you know, how inspiring it is to know that everything you do matters, everything you say matters. And it is important to be able to really build up girls at a very young age and let them know that you can be unstoppable, you can be anything. And that's what we can all do for each other. So it really brings back so much for me, just in my own life, and wanting to make sure that I pass that on as well as much as I can.
Yeah, how important it is to build up our girls. It's such an important statement, Sandra. And Carla, what do you think, speaking of that, do you think is a responsibility that falls on us to help foster spaces to make sure girls can not only own their confidence, but can hold on to that sense of strength and self-worth as they grow up and face the inevitable challenges of life?
I thought that was such a moving piece, and I love hearing Sandra's story. It is a reminder of what I also loved about it was the variety of roles and the variety of ways in which we show that a woman's leadership, a woman's power can emerge in the world. There's so many needs and purposes for all of us. So it's a reminder to us as we are raising young ones to let those experiences and those experiments play out, because you have to find the place where your power is sort of destined to serve, right? And we need to give girls those experiences to try and fail and to try and fly.
I love what you said about letting them fail. That's so important to know that that's okay and to lean in and to try again. But you know what the little girl was describing, I think of you two, strong, successful, and unstoppable. And if I were to go through the list of achievements and all of the awards the two of you have accumulated, they would probably take up the entire hour. I mean, Sandra, you were CEO 3 times and founder twice. You've led companies such as Diane von Furstenberg, one of my favorite brands, Juicy Couture and BCBG, and a supply chain tech company. You created the first teen celebrity brand management company and built a business for Selena Gomez when she was 16. Wow. Now you're building a virtual education program platform that provides continuing education for working professionals so needed. And Carla, you oversee a multi-billion-dollar portfolio at the largest retailer in the world. When both of you look back at your journeys, your very long journeys of success, if you had to pick that one thing that you think your inner child would be most proud of, what would that be? Sandra, I'll send this one to you first.
The resilience. But you mentioned I am and have been a CEO multiple times. I have been a founder multiple times. It is a roller coaster ride, just like life is. And all the different experiences, there's good, there's bad, there's everything in between. There's a lot of failure, or at least I've had a lot of failure, and there's a lot of success. And you do learn from both. But it's the resilience. It's being able to pick yourself back up again. And, oftentimes I get asked the question of, well, how did you do it? And I'm like, well, I didn't have a choice. I never thought I had a choice. I didn't have a choice to break down and not get back up again. And I saw my parents, I'm first generation Mexican, and my parents came as immigrants when they were very young, in their teens, and they got married and they started a tortilla factory later on. But I saw the sacrifices that they made. I saw the sacrifices mi abuelito made, and working as a bracero on the railroads. And I saw those sacrifices, and I felt such a deep responsibility to make sure that what I was doing, and I still do, by the way, that whatever I was accomplishing was really a tribute to all the sacrifices that they made to bring their family here. And that's what has just made sure that I get back up again. And so I think resilience more than anything else.
Yeah. Isn't that so true? I mean, that common thread of even as young people appreciating the journey that our immigrant familia paved for us, and how they overcame in circumstances where they had far less than what we have now. I don't know about you, Sandra, but I find myself, my father was an immigrant to this country, and I find myself telling that story so often because it's such evidence of our power to overcome, our power to be resilient.
It's so true. Interesting.
And well, we all have it. Daniela has an amazing story herself, unbelievable in resilience, and you've got a long way to go as well. But you mentioned earlier the long history that we have, AKA been around a long time. But yes, I think that with age comes wisdom. And Carla, when you were saying you mentioned these stories, I think it's because you appreciate it so much more as you start experiencing so much more. So you appreciate the sacrifices, and you appreciate the responsibility and that you've been given, and the opportunities, that we have to be able to make a difference.
So when I think of that little girl for myself, it's amazing because when I was little, I already knew that I wanted to have some ability to lead others. I must have been that person who always wanted to be at the front of the line. I don't know what it was, but I think she would be very proud to know that after trying a lot of things and a lot of paths and a lot of ways, that she was able to have an impact. I think for me, it was a lot about letting others find their power. And even as a little girl, I just knew that I wanted to be able to do that. And that's what is exciting about this, the positions that Sandra and I are in, where we have the ability to bring others along and infuse that confidence in them and kind of pave a way and groom leaders and groom a future generation. That's what I wanted to do. And thank goodness I've got the blessing that I get to do that.
Carla, I'm so glad you said that. I think it is a perfect tie-in to what we're talking about today. And, the opportunities that we have now for community, and everybody talks about community, and it's a word that gets thrown around a lot. We as Latinos, we already have a community, right? But we just need to embrace that community, and we need to take that responsibility of helping others along. And, it's something that I take very seriously and have now for a little bit of time, but I didn't always in my career. I didn't always take that seriously. I was, focused on my career and growth and not standing out. And there's been a lot of lessons learned. And obviously we're in a time now where we're embracing more of our heritage, and we're able to do so and speak more loudly about it.
And speaking of bringing others along, there's a quote from Maya Angelou in which she said that every time she stepped on a stage, she brought with her a mentor, every person that had supported her on some part of her journey. Carla, I'll send this one to you. Have you thought about this way of thinking, bringing the people who have embraced you and built you up whenever you find your own success or moments of your own success? Who do you feel you bring with you? And do you feel a duty to that person, to be that person for others?
This is, I get a little bit emotional when I think about that quote from Maya Angelou's. Thank you for giving us that inspiration. I will tell you a story. When I got the honor of being invited to be on the board of trustees of my alma mater, Princeton, I thought a lot about the United States and the history of segregation in education in the United States. As we've talked about, my father was an immigrant to this country. He was a Black Panamanian. He came to the United States as an adult, and he came to the South. At the time he came in the late 1950s, the United States was legally segregated. So he came from a country where he was free to come to the United States, which tells you a lot about what people believe, what immigrants believe is the land of opportunity when you think the opportunities are even better for you in a place where you don't even have all the legal rights and privileges. And my mom, a Black New Orleanian, she also grew up in the segregated South. And they told us stories as we were growing up about the things that they didn't even get the chance to try to do, and why they tried to open so many doors for my brother and I so that we could really reach whatever was the height of our heights. So when I got invited to be on the board of trustees of Princeton, a school that only allowed women in the 1970s, even though Princeton's been around since the 1600s, I thought to myself, I have the privilege of bringing with me ancestors and generations, and they need to sit with me at a table they were never even allowed the chance to get invited to. I owe it to them. So when I think about who I bring with me in a room, I know I bring the past, but I also hope I bring the future. I know we'll talk at some point about our children, but I have a teenage daughter and a teenage son. And so I think it's important that wherever we go, we also are working things through so that the people who follow us, the generations that follow, don't have to knock down as many barriers, don't have to show up in rooms where there's such disbelief that they are there. So I like to think I'm bringing the past and the future with me.
Gal, I want to stick with this point and speak a little bit about the differences in the generational challenges that we're seeing. It's interesting because in the book that I wrote that's called The Other, I interview other women of color, and we talk about impediments to going up the ladder. And a lot of them are immigrants themselves, children of immigrants, second and third generation. And they hold on to the sacrifices that their families have suffered to get them to have an opportunity. And one of the things that I find interesting that came up in the studies and the conversations that I've had with these women is that whenever they're in a room about to speak out, or whenever they're in a negotiating room asking for more, there's a certain sense of quiet that overcomes them because they fear that the opportunity is fleeting. They fear that they need to show that they're grateful because they're having experiences and opportunities generationally that didn't exist. They're holding on to something new. What do you think, and how have you seen it with your own kids on the generational challenges that they face? And what are some pieces of advice that you're instilling in them? And I wonder if part of it is being afraid to fail, because you mentioned that at the beginning, and I can't stop thinking about that because it is so important.
Yeah. I love how the universe, our creator, when we get the opportunity to be parents, we learn so much more about people. We learn so much more about ourselves. Sandra, I'm sure this is true for you. But my two children, a teenage boy and a teenage girl, they couldn't be more different. And luckily, my husband got a mini me and I got a mini me, so that helps us a little bit. But you really do have to learn that they show up in the world as a full individual. And how do you meet that child, that human where they are, and help them unlock the part of them that has so much potential and not try to make them be anybody else. And also, given the extra weight on our shoulders, Daniela, that you mentioned, and it you learn from the book, and that, you know, we're not here complaining about all of the beautiful mosaic that makes us who we are, because it's what makes us so fuerte, right? It's what makes us so strong also. But we have to give them the gifts of finding who they uniquely are. I have a son, very quiet, few words, lots of deep thinking. And I have a daughter that's like that dancer in the video we saw in the beginning, just, you know, lighting up a stage and lighting up the world. And then we do have to be honest with them about the way the world sees them, for better or for worse. And I'm raising Black teenagers in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is where George Floyd was killed. So you have to imagine the number of conversations that I have to have with my son saying that he's 16, he's a driver now, that it's not your fault, you don't deserve it, but there's a truth about the world that I need to teach you before you get behind the wheel of this car that might happen to you. And it is my duty to give you all the tools to be prepared in this situation. I won't be there with you when the time comes, but you will have what you need. And you will meet the occasion, because we just will pour into you almost, hopefully, till you're overflowing. You know, teenagers, I think that they feel they've got enough.
Let me guess, which one was your mini me?
How about you, Sandra? You're raising 3 girls, right? 3 girls?
No, two girls and a boy.
Girls.
So I, you know, just to kind of jump into this conversation, mine's very different, obviously, from the challenges that Carla is having to face with her kids, which, you know, I don't have to deal with that because it is a very prominent conversation I'm sure you have on a regular basis. But, you know, I would say I'm going to go back to just resilience for a minute, because I have 3 kids. My oldest is 22. She is in college. She's at her 3rd year at Yale. My second is my son, the one I was talking about earlier. But my son, who is 19 in his first year of college at Loyola Marymount in LA. And then my youngest is my mini me in many ways, personality wise specifically. And she is a senior in high school, but she moved to Miami, Florida as a junior in high school because she's a dancer and dances with Miami City Ballet. So she's a ballet dancer. The discipline that I have seen from athletes and dancers, because I was neither one of those growing up, has just been incredible. But I would say that overall, between all 3 of them, who are all very different personalities, is they have failure, right? And the failure can be so small they haven't had big failures yet, but they're very small in the context of failure overall, but they have them, whether it's school related, whether it's I wasn't placed in this role, or I didn't get, you know, in the case of my daughter now, you know, if she got deferred to a college, you know, or whatever it is, like these are small failures, but it's the resilience that I've been trying to teach them, not only in terms of how I verbally communicate with them about things, but really what they've seen. So I have been a single mom for the last 16 years. So very young. My youngest, I had 3 kids under the age of 4. And it was a challenge, right? It wasn't what I planned on in my life. It wasn't what I anticipated, but it was what life became. And so when I got divorced, it was something that I immediately poured everything that I could into my kids, but I was also a working mom. So I also had to make sure that I had the balance. It's actually when I started the business as a celebrity team brand management company with Selena Gomez, because I needed to be able to find something, create something after being in corporate and knowing that I wasn't getting home until 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, and I was traveling every week. I didn't think that I could continue that type of life with having 3 young kids as a single parent. So I created this entrepreneurial situation with a business partner, and we had a great business with her for 6 years and on. That's a lifestyle brand that we created. But with that, they've been a part of all of my entrepreneurial experiences, my corporate experiences, I have brought them with me. They went to every Selena photo shoot that we had. They have been in negotiation rooms with me because I've brought them there. And so they've experienced what it takes to make and build a career. They've experienced what it takes to be able to support a family. They've experienced the resilience of having ups and downs and having failures, both personally and professionally. And I think that it's just such a core to what I think about when you ask that question. It's really making sure that they have the resilience to know that you can keep going and no one can keep you down. You have to be strong for yourself and focus on your own strength and your own value card, because that's the most important thing in the room.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we see all these statistics of how few Latinas have made it in the positions like the ones you've all held in your careers. How few of us are on board of director and positions of global influence, and it's really hard to come across these numbers. But one of the things that I kind of want to do in this conversation is not focus too much on the why, but on the practical steps. And as I was writing this book, there are so many different structural and institutional biases and prejudices that keep us down. And I want to focus on the practical career pieces of advice that speaks to the equation of the part that we can control for both of you. So Sandra, I'll kick it back to you. What do you think was something that really helped you build that resilience in an effective way when you met roadblocks in your own career?
I think this goes back to family upbringing and confidence through knowledge. My mother always paid us to read books, paid us for every A that we got, paid us for learning and learning and learning and learning. And so it was instilled in me very young that I needed to learn more and more and more. I was one of 6 kids, or I am one of 6 kids. And there were several of them that went to Ivy League schools. I did not. I chose to go to a state university in Texas. And I always felt that no matter what, I needed to achieve more. And so as I continued, and I started in my career and I continued throughout my career, it was always about, what else can I learn? What else can I do? How do I make sure that I know what that person's doing and that role is and that responsibility, so that I can get further ahead? So 1, it's always to me about continuing education. 2, it is about setting your goals. What those goals are, it could be financial goals, it could be title, it could be, whatever those goals are. Set those goals and make sure that you then backtrack on, how am I going to get there? What do I need to do to get there? Right? Because that's really important. And then 3 is, because I really believe that knowledge is confidence, because it gives you more confidence when you know what you're talking about, when you know what somebody else is talking about. If you don't know, it's like you're not going to be the first person. It's more likely that you're not going to be the first person to step up and speak about it. But if you understand and if you know, it gives you confidence to then have a voice at the table. When you have that voice, use it. Mm-hmm. And if you're wrong, you will be wrong at times, but you're going to be right as well. And you're going to learn from each time that you're wrong. And, it's fake it till you make it. It's make sure that you focus on learning and continuing to build upon your skills. And that's one thing that I continue to do even now as I pivot from role to role, or from industry to different industry. And I love that because, it's becoming more and more relevant. You don't want to be irrelevant as you go further on in your career. So it's really building upon those skills and continuing to focus on building your own knowledge base and your confidence.
Carla?
Well, I would say that the journey is a long one, and it is not always a straight path. One of the things I always want people to know, so I'm fortunate now, I get to speak to a lot of people. I get to be in settings where someone will read my bio, right? Sandra, I'm sure you have this experience. And it looks like, it's in some ice skating straight line, from early childhood all the way to the halls of success. And Sandra, you've told us somewhat about your childhood and your experience. And I am making a leap of faith to understand, or to guess that for you, it was also a winding road. So I want, yeah, right. And that's why that resilience word, it's important to know that you can't even always see the finish line, because the path is not a straight one. there are three things that I like to keep in mind when I talk to people about how they can find their own path and their own journey. The first one is run towards hard things, run towards the things that are difficult. The second one is trust your gut. And the third one is find your cheering section. So I have a phrase I like to say, which is eat your vegetables, which is the same to me as run towards hard things. Sometimes we have to look at a high wall or a high barrier and say, today is the day. I'm getting my attitude together and I'm charging that wall. Because only when we test our true abilities do we realize, like, whoa, I was on top of that wall. I can see the next horizon. And now I know I'm fit to go farther. And then I like trust your gut. I know there have been times, and I look back on these moments when leaders I admired, leaders who were ahead of me in my career and who I would look to for wisdom. They could have been a boss. They could have been somebody I thought was a mentor, told me maybe now wasn't the time for me to take that big step. Maybe I wasn't quite ready. Maybe this wasn't just the right one. But something inside of me, maybe it's that younger Carla, that inner child who just didn't take no for an answer. But somewhere in my mind, I could quickly do the calculus that they were giving me advice that wasn't actually fit for me. You will get a lot of advice in your life. You have to be able to discern. Some of it is for you and some of it is for the trash can. And then the last thing is find your cheering section, because we all have dark days. We all have tough days. And sometimes you just need that crew that believes in you, no matter how bad it is, how much you messed up, how bad the presentation went, if you're having a bad hair day, you weren't your best, and they still love you no matter what. And they see the inner light and the inner possibility in you. You have to know who those people are, and just every once in a while, occasionally just go and be with them, visit them, call them, Zoom them, have a time, have a session, and fill your battery for that long and not straight path.
I would love to add one more thing, Daniela.
Yeah.
Carla, I'm going to assume that you feel the same way. But one more thing that is really important that I didn't understand as much, but has certainly built up over time. I like to call myself a personal introvert and a professional extrovert. And that is going to work for me from a business standpoint. And that's networking. The networking aspect is really important. How small, how big, how often, it's so important. There were years in my life when I had small kids, as I mentioned, and I was really busy with them, and I didn't do as much, and it was harder to kind of pick up afterwards. So keeping the ability, the opportunities, that cheering section that Carla's talking about, like build your cheering section, because you're going to need different types of cheering sections as you get along in your career and along in your life. And so that goes with networking. And networking doesn't mean like, I have to put on a fake persona, I need to go in a room. No, it's like meet people, talk to them, learn from them, let them learn from you. And, I get mentored by everyone. Daniela, I'm mentoring, you're mentoring me just by listening and watching and reading and seeing you on TV and all the things you're doing. And you can be mentored by anyone, you can mentor anyone, and just open up that community through networking and being vulnerable and letting them into your life and letting you help others as well.
I love that. I call those micro mentoring moments. You can learn from anybody around you. And I tell this to women, especially women in parts of the country that aren't necessarily in big cities or don't have accessible mentors. You can find mini mentoring sessions from everyone around you. I love that piece of advice.
I love that, Daniela. I want to say one more important thing, because I learned this from my father, who when I was a little girl, he would take me to go run Saturday errands. I don't even know, does anybody run Saturday errands anymore? Is that a thing? We would go to the bank, we would go to Kmart, we would go to the automotive service store to go pick parts up when he wanted to repair the cars, whatever it was. And little Carla was always going with him. And he would always teach me, everyone is important. We would go to the bank and he would say, I know we're here to meet with, the manager in the back, but I want you to pay attention to how important it is, the person who decides who gets the next meeting. That could be the secretary in the situation. He taught us that it didn't matter. People were the custodial team. You need to look them in the eyes, show them the respect. I remember when I was working late nights in a corporate job one time, and I didn't have kids yet. I was working so late that I would be there when the custodial team would come. And this custodian was the same guy that would take my trash and empty things out every night. And we would get into these conversations, and I learned that he had come to this country as a refugee, and that in his home country, he was a math teacher. Here, he was a custodian taking out my trash. Now, I don't know where he is now in his journey, and I'm sure he was working with his own vision to become something. But the micro mentoring, what I want people to know is your teachers are everywhere. Your teachers are in every form and factor of a person and of a situation in life. And we just need to see the beauty and the genius all around us.
And since we're talking about young girls, two things that I have been impressing upon my kids since they were very young, and I think it's very important for girls: eye contact. My kids heard ad nauseum, and having a strong handshake. When a woman comes up and a girl comes up and they look you in the eye and they give you a strong handshake, it is meaningful and people will always remember it. So those are two things that I always encourage and have encouraged my kids and my girls to do since they were very little.
That's so good. And speaking of becoming unstoppable women, this is part of what we're talking about here. But if you could speak to yourself when you were a little girl, and we'll keep this one short because we've got audience questions. But Carla, what would you say to yourself? One piece of advice, if you were to look back on the little girl you were, and you were telling her to become unstoppable, what would that piece of advice be?
I feel like she gives me advice. She is a pretty bold, little sassy girl. And I think the advice she gave me was, don't let them tell you you can't. Don't let them tell you you can't. I had a high school guidance counselor who told me I shouldn't apply to Princeton because the cost of the application was too expensive for my family. And she said, don't let him tell us we can't. And we did.
I love that. Sandra?
I would right there with you, Carla, and don't let them tell you no. Don't take no for an answer. But yeah, I think that absolutely that imposter syndrome comes through when you've allowed those thoughts to seep in, and you deserve it. You deserve to be in the room. You deserve to be where you are. And it's hard. You have to fight those thoughts every day, all the time. Even when you're a CEO, it doesn't matter. You're still fighting those thoughts. So just exactly what Carla said. And don't let them tell you no. And don't take no for an answer. Keep going and just be resilient.
Oh, Sandra, I'm so glad you said that. I feel like I want to say it again for the people in the back. Even when you're a CEO, no one can believe that. Even when you're a CEO.
Yeah.
I don't think about that. I'm so glad that you said that. It's so empowering for the rest of us.
Every day, fighting thoughts every day.
Now I want to ask you some questions that were sent in through the Women's Network. So Carla, I'll start with you. The first one's for you. What cultural insights did you lean into as you were breaking into these global brands?
I think what I think about being the daughter of, as I've told you, the daughter of an immigrant to this country, the daughter of two Black people who grew up in a time when we had all kinds of legal barriers in this country. What I learned is that like water and sunlight, we know how to flow through cracks. So we know how to see possibility where others see closure. And that's what I take with me in business all the time. Listen, I might not be the smartest person with the accounting information. I might not be the person who's, I don't know, writing the best presentation, but I'm going to be the person who says, I know there's a solution to this problem. I know there's something we haven't thought of yet. I know that because that's everything my family legacy tells me, is that there is always a solution to your problem.
So good. Okay, Sandra, the next one's for you. Let's see. As a Latina, what general market perceptions did you have to challenge, prove wrong in order to establish your credibility?
Well, first of all, as a woman in business, even in retail and in fashion, which is where I have spent my career, and now, in technology, it's very male dominated. So as a woman, that's one part. As a Latina, that's another part, but a lot more of that is, I feel like, in our own heads. I would say that more than anything else, what I've personally had to make sure that I kind of overcome for my own feelings is that thought and that little gnawing thought in the back of my head that, oh, they're more educated. Oh, they're better. Oh, they've had more experience. Oh, they know more. No, I've learned time and time again that we are our own individual selves. There's only one unique you. And the experiences that we all have as individuals is what we're bringing into a room. So you're bringing that power and that advantage of having those experiences. So for me, I've kind of had to make sure that I go into that room knowing that, okay, well, I may not have been an investment banker throughout my career, but I've had just as many deals, sold a company, raised capital, and done other things that have had enough experience to know how to get me to the next level. And I think that, a lot of the perception perhaps of, oh, you're in that industry, or it's a creative industry, it's not a finance industry, or it's not a legal industry, or whatever. It doesn't matter. I'm in an industry that's the most complicated industry from beginning to end, product development to legal to logistics to, everything in between, and consumer. So there's a lot there that over the years, I think I've heard and I've had people kind of belittle either what you're in or the industry or whatever it is that you're doing. And you just have to realize that all those skills and all the learning and all the knowledge that you're gaining, no one else has but you. So you're bringing that gold standard to the table.
I'm so glad, Sandra, that you shared that piece of, let's call it what it is, inferiority in some ways. And it makes me think of the title of my book, which I hate, called The Other. But, Tori Morrison, I think, was the one that said the other is just simply seeing yourselves through the eyes of someone else. So when you're navigating through life, seeing yourself through somebody else's eyes, you belittle yourself. You think you're not smart enough. You feel like you have to follow rules of inclusion in order to belong. And the reality is, a lot of workplaces, many of them don't have the factors that allow us to be able to belong and to bring our full selves at work, especially for women of color. And Carla, that this goes on with the second question that is brought up for you. Can you share some examples of how you've lifted women of color in male-dominated corporate environments?
First of all, Daniela, I'm headed straight to Amazon to get The Other because it sounds
it comes out in August.
So I'm so glad that you have let us know. I got to meet these women that are in this book and get to know more about your writing. I am so excited about that. Lift. You know what I try to do to lift women of color up, and lift not just women of color. I want to lift up the people who feel like corporate America doesn't reflect their authentic self, and they don't know if they are that square peg trying to pierce through that round hole. That's who I want to help break a path for. And the biggest thing I can do that I've learned over the years is to bring actual, real Carla, bring my voice to the room, bring my experience to the room, and show up like I authentically am, and then affirm others when they show up authentically. So for example, about a decade ago, I decided I wasn't going to use sports metaphors anymore. It's difficult. They're peppered throughout business language, but I don't know that much about sports, although I'm becoming a great sports mom now that I have teenagers, but I still embarrass them because I still don't really know a lot about sports. I decided I'm going to bring metaphors that make sense to my world: dance, theater, performance, creativity, being a black girl magic, whatever it is. I speak in my real language so that I invite others to relax their shoulders. And when you're in a room with me, I want you to show up as who you are. Then you find an energy source that is even more invigorated, because I feel like when we try to put on the costume of replicating an image or a model that isn't us, we are using some of our precious energy, and we only have a limited amount. We're using some of our precious energy to put on a costume and carry that costume. Then you've diminished how much actual energy you have to do whatever you're there, your vision, your vocation in life. And so I say, don't wear that costume when you're in a room with me. Come as you are. Everyone is welcome at this party. And then we can unleash all 150% of your you. I always tell people, whenever I get a new person on a team, I say, you are exactly the right person for this moment, because whoever you are, the universe brought you here right now because we need you. So that's what if I show up as me, I give everybody, I hope, license to be them.
That's amazing, Carla, but there are very few of you. There are so few of you, right? It's like we need to be able to replicate you many times over.
I better write a book like Daniela.
I just want to take a second for any of the leaders that are watching this right now. Carla, what you said, affirm others when they're showing up as themselves. So important. I just want everybody that is in a leadership position to remember that and to execute that, because it makes a world of a difference.
Yeah.
Final question, Sandra, I'll send this one over to you. Do you think there are sectors that women can dive into that really could move the needle on progress moving forward?
Oh, so I am very focused on next generation skills, and I think it's a very important part. I get calls every week, literally, from women in my life who've either worked for me, worked with me, or just want advice because they're in a place, whether they're going through divorce, whether they need to get back in the workforce, whether their career has stalled, other examples where they want to know, how do I pivot? How do I move the needle for myself? How do I change and learn digital skills? Because everything today is digital, no matter what industry sector you're in. And I think it's really important to make sure that you are keeping up with trends and keeping up with what's happening culturally as well, but also to get involved with coursework and learning skills online. There's a lot of online resources that have the ability, but I think there's some specific roles that apply to a lot of sectors that there's going to be tremendous amount of openings for, and there already are, and there's not enough of. And that goes into data scientists, engineers. It doesn't have to be geeky. It doesn't have to be, oh, I'm not good at math. No, they're really interesting roles, and you can learn it so much differently today. Digital, anything digital in terms of marketing, in terms of social media, there's not enough. And this goes across every industry sector, right? Everybody has a social media presence. And how many people in my generation know how to work TikTok or know what matters on TikTok? They don't. And running a company, I don't want to hire somebody my age to do TikTok and to manage that platform. I want to hire somebody your age, Daniela. I want to hire somebody who really understands the platform and how to engage with people. So there's so many opportunities today that there's not enough of, because all industries are digital now and on the web. So Web3, the metaverse, NFTs, like all these new things that exist, these are new skills that we didn't even have some of that in our vernacular 12 months ago, but now it is. And now it's going forward heavily. So I think instead of focusing on a sector or industry, I think that there's roles that are going to be able to be transitioned across all sectors that are important to be able to get into.
Wow, what an amazing conversation. I wish I had more time to talk to you, gals. I'm going to bother you guys offline because I still have a million questions. I want to thank our amazing panelists. Gracias a todas por su inspiración y sabios consejos. This is just the beginning of our Women's Month event, so look for more to come from the Women's Network and Unstoppable Women. Finally, we invite you all to follow at Mujeres Imparables on Instagram to find the stories of more inspiring women like the ones we had the pleasure of speaking with today. Thank you all, y que nada los detenga.
Oh, thank you, Daniela.
Yes, thank you, Daniela.